Um, the picture on our cover page here is Brenna Stevens, who did her first OD 100 when she was 14 years old. But if you go back a little bit, at 9 years old, she did her first 75 at the Vermont 100. I actually sponsored her, and
Diane,
she will actually be one of our.
Diane, what does sponsor mean for people who don't know? When I first started in sport, I did not know what that
Somebody
meant.
is a junior, when somebody is a junior under the age of 16 or doesn't have a certain number of miles, they must be sponsored by an adult, ride with an adult throughout the ride. I met Brenna and her mother when they were first getting into endurance, and within a year, she was attempting the Vermont 75, of which I rode with her, and we got through it. And a little fun note on that was, between coming into the next to the last vet check, she got very quiet, and I kept asking her if she was okay, and her horse kept falling back, and it turned out she was falling asleep in the saddle. She was only 9, and this was like 1 a.m, and we came into the last vet check before the finish, and I mentioned this to her mother, and her mother gave her coffee for the first time. She was very chatty for the last 12 miles. But anyway, and shortly after that, at age 14, she completed the OD 100, and she actually will be one of our panelists for our March webinar, which will be a group of people who have completed the OD 100 several times and done the Tevis, and talk about how they have been successful at both of those rides.
I
And
remember.
regarding sponsorship, I am a big fan of bringing youngsters along. We have a number of them in our crowd. I highly recommend pawning your own children off on someone else, because riding with your own children makes for a miserable day. But if you pick the right kids, it can be an awfully fun adventure.
One of my favorite thoughts or memories was I took my nephew when he was 9 years old on the Fort Valley ride, and it was his first 35-mile ride, and he was a sort of a survivor, and we sort of chirped along, and he was pretty had a really good time. And I pointed out every time we passed something amazing or something, I pointed it out, and we talked about this, and we talked about that, and the ride wore on, and he got quieter and quieter. And so we came up the east side of Sherman Gap, and we came to the top of the Massanutten, and we looked over, and he interrupted very quickly. He says, yeah, scenery. Can we skip it this time? So
Thanks for the guided tour, Aunt Lanny.
yes, kids are amazing. Kids are somebody else's kid. I would never, like you say, want to take my own family member through, but somebody else's kid is awesome.
I pawned my child off on a couple of other adults, and they thought it was the greatest day ever. But when I tried to ride with them, it was Wine City. So he always enjoyed riding with others more so than his mom.
Brenda was so funny because she swore she was not falling asleep. But once she had the coffee in her, she admitted all the dreams she was having while she was riding, sound asleep in the saddle. It was very cute.
I was gonna say, one reason I was looking for a good picture for this title page, and then I saw this, and it also mentioned that her horse was a $550 horse.
Several of the horses she has successfully competed in have been rescues. That's what her mom and her do. They rescue, they retrain, and find the right discipline for them. If you ever go to her Facebook page, especially when she was younger, you'll see her riding horses bareback, jumping bareback. So they have retrained them and worked through all the issues, and then found, permanent homes in different careers that fit what that horse should be doing.
That's cool.
Yep.
That's cool. Bob, I'm sending you an email right now. Well, how much time? Only 6 minutes. We can actually start early if we want. It's all your all's decision.
And I have a question, so I'll
Oh,
always
she is
let
there.
people know in the, hello.
Here,
In the
hi,
chat.
Lisa.
Yay, you are
Hi,
here. Oh, thank
everyone.
goodness.
I
Yay.
am, sorry.
Oh,
That's okay. There's our chat monitor.
Yes,
woohoo.
I'm here.
Yay.
And I'll keep sending out chats to people, to say, hey, put your questions here. But always is like, are we doing questions at the end or taking them as we go? Because I want to let people know.
I think this time, can we do them as we go? Because this is a more sort of free-flowing conversation.
Yep.
Are we okay with that?
I am absolutely okay with that. Yep.
Well, we can still save a couple at the end too, because I'm sure some interesting ones will pop up.
Yeah, I'm sure. And some of them are more encompassing or don't quite fit with
Right.
what's being discussed. But yeah, I can do that. I'll interrupt to, or not interrupt. I will pause people and, and then provide the question.
Fabulous.
So-
Sounds wonderful.
So, okay, since we have 5 minutes left before we want to start, I want to throw something out as one of the people who's one of the participants here who's watching, and she's been watching for a year, and she asked me a question which I haven't gotten back to yet. Is she's been riding a really good, well-behaved horse, and she's recently got a new one. And her question to me was is the no frills ride good for a green horse or a learning horse?
Oh yeah, because that first time
Yes.
wakes them up.
Well, and so, because my answer would be, is that the no frills ride is pretty technical. I mean, if
It
you,
is.
Yeah.
it's pretty technical, which is not a bad thing, because it means
And-
it's not, yeah, go ahead, Lisa.
No, I was gonna say, there's that one stretch where you just can't do anything. You just are picking your way through rocks, right? Along the
Yep.
riverbed.
There are several of
that's a-
those at No Frills.
Yes. Quite a
Yeah, and
few.
that's a real eye opener for people.
Well,
But
and I will say as the ride manager, anytime I find somebody who's coming to No Frills for the very first time, the advice that I give them is to walk up that hill. The ride starts up a gravel road. It's very tempting to break into a trot, to break into a canter, and that's where horses tie up at the top. If you ride smart, you start out slow and really warm your horse up that hill. It's very, very doable. And as Lisa was saying, there are sections that are very technical that you can't move out. But then there are sections that you can. If you are smart at the start and you start out slow and you let that horse really warm up till you get to the top, in the 30, you're going up about a mile and then you turn left. In the 55, you're on the road for a while, and it's just very, very tempting to move out fast at the beginning. And it's always cold, damp. We never know what the weather's going to be. I mean, there's times we've had all 4 seasons in the one day of the ride. But if you start out and really let the horse warm up, it's a very, very doable ride, even for a first ride.
And right, because I think the key for the no frills ride is to understand is that there are, so the first mile, you really do want to walk it, even though everybody else may or may not be trotting. And then the next 2 hours, not 2 miles, but the next 2 hours, you will want to rip your hair out with your fingernails. Is that it's a very technical trail. It's difficult, it's rocky, it's beautiful, it's gorgeous. You can see miles on either side, but you just got to stick it out, because then there are equal sections of good moving out, flat, soft, good, beautiful footing. And so, so there's about a 2-hour section of, I'm never going to finish this ride. I will never be on time. And then you'll have an hour of gorgeous moving out, flat, wide open. And then you'll have another hour of who thought this goat path was a good ride. And then but the key is, like, isn't it like, because it used to be the last 7 miles, but it really is like the last 9 miles.
It's
now
9 miles.
is-
Yeah, 9 miles. But at
9
that point, you've got, they're like, okay, whatever, and they're behaving.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, so-
the
right, so
good
the-
part about all of that technical rip your hair out trail is that your horse and you have to focus on one another. It's that whole bonding, trust building, like you have to trust that your horse doesn't want to throw you over the mountain, and he has to trust that you don't want to throw him over the mountain. So it's, to me, a very good brain building, as opposed to, for new people to the scene, a fox catcher,
Oh,
where it's wide open field after wide open field, which the terrain is easier on their body, but it is hell on both of your brains, because it's a horse race.
You can
So,
see
you know,
everywhere, horses
yeah,
passing.
and
you
they can
with-
see people coming and going, and, you know, in terms
The
of
base, the
getting a
ride
horse
cramp.
to bond with you, a
Yeah.
trail like a no frills trail is far better for that,
the adrenaline
because
at
it
Foxcatcher.
forces that connection.
The adrenaline at Foxcatcher is so palpable. I mean, the ride camp is just, it's crazy. And no frills, it seems like it's not as much. I was gonna say something, and it's at 7:00, we're about to start. I just realized something, Terry, you can actually make a SMART goal even about your specific ride, like Lonnie was saying, instead of
Yes,
galloping up there and having your horse tie up, actually plan out, say, I'm gonna walk up this first mountain, I'm gonna do this.
absolutely. You can make a mile by mile goal. You
Yes.
can make a loop by loop goal.
And
It's all
that's
about
really
goals
important.
within goals.
To break it down, that's super important.
Yeah.
We
'Cause I-
have 20 people in the waiting room, right?
Awesome.
All right, we can start.
Okay,
Let's do it.
Said my thing.
okay, now I have to make, now I have to always remember how to make it go forward. Oh, sorry. Yeah, let's do that. Okay, we have our presenters. We've been, our team for the webinars. We have Lonnie Newcomb, Terry Carroll, Diane Connolly, and myself. You can read there to find out what we all do with endurance, what we've done. Also, our personal emails are out there. If you do have questions, feel free to email us and ask us questions. We're glad to help. Oh, there it goes. Okay, this is the OD, and I'm gonna have Diane, who's our ride manager for a couple of rides, talk about this.
The Old Dominion organization actually hosts 3 rides a year. The No Frills this year is April 15th to 16th. I manage that. The Old Dominion is in June, and we're going to talk about that just a little later. And then Fort Valley is in October. And we've actually moved our weekend up to the 3rd weekend in October, the 14th and 15th. And that's in the actual Fort Valley area. So 2 of our rides are west of 81, and Fort Valley is on the east side of 81. All in the George Washington National Forest. This year, the Old Dominion is actually going to be hosting the national championship in conjunction with our June ride. So on Thursday, June 9th, we'll be hosting the 55 National Championship along with the Ride and Tie Long Distance Regional Championship. On Friday, the 10th, we'll be hosting our normal open division 25 and 55 and the Ride and Tie Short Course. And on the Saturday, the 11th, we'll be hosting the National Championship 100 along with the Open Division 100 and the Ride and Tie 100. And later on one of our last slides, we'll talk about how you can come volunteer at these rides. All of our rides are sanctioned by AERC, our national organization, ECTRA, which is the Competitive Trail Ride Association, OATS, which is the Ohio Long Distance Trail Riding Association, and Southeast.
Thank you, Diane. Now we're gonna go to Terry. This is
Okay.
Terry's quote.
This was sort of where we got to in trying to figure out how to define what it is that you look for to determine if things go right. When things go wrong, you know it. You know, you've fallen, you've broken something, you know, somebody's unhappy. That's very easy to define. But knowing when things go right is more difficult to define, and it's very easy to overlook unless you map out your list of things that you want to go right. Having a big, broad title of I want to do endurance doesn't necessarily mean that you will do it successfully or that you will know when you are achieving your goals to become an endurance rider. So we are setting out tonight to talk about how you can determine when things are going right.
Okay, enter. By doing that, we're going to make some SMART goals to reach our pot of endurance dreams. Lonnie's going to talk about this. I have to give a shout out. That's my cute little mare there.
But so I think one of the things that Terry said was true is it's occasionally somebody will say to us is, I want to do endurance. Can you help me? And one time the president of the Ride and Tie Association told me sort of resignedly, he says, I have a baby chick philosophy. He says, if you have to help them break out of the shell, they're going to die anyway. And that has really stuck with me, is that if you want to do endurance, you got to have an endurance mentality. Is you have to be a self-starter, because if you wait for somebody else to come and ride with you, or if you wait for somebody else to pick you up and take you somewhere, it's a very, very hard thing to do. And so when you're getting started, you really need to have your own truck and trailer, and you do not have to have a big living quarter trailer. You just need to have some way of transporting your horse. And so as Terry says, is that you need to make it happen any way you can. And there are going to be, because again, what we talked about a little bit earlier before we started is it's easy to find out or to know when things aren't going right. But when things don't break, you want to keep moving forward toward whatever your goal is. And when you first start out, your goals are usually, I want to do an endurance ride. And once you've been doing this for 20 or 30 years, you pick the prettiest, the nicest, the friendliest, the most adventurous rides you can. But at the beginning, you have to say, I need you have to have, and again, we didn't make this up. This is an education thing, but you have to have specific goals so you know exactly where you're going and what you're going to do. And if that doesn't work out, you change your goals. Goals are not, there's nothing worse than being hard and fast, because you will be disappointed all the time. You have to be flexible, but you need to have specific goals. They need to be measurable, so you know if you're actually getting there. And it's not only distance, it's, as Terry says, can you get on your horse without somebody holding its head? Will your horse go by itself without screaming, hollering, dumping you and running back to the camp? Are your goals attainable? Are they realistic? And we actually don't believe in reality. Is not a one of us believes in reality. We all believe in fantasy and trying anything, because if you don't try, you don't get. So realistic's interesting, but not that important. And then give yourself some time constraints. Just find out when you want to do this by, because if you say, when I retire, I want to do endurance, that's never going to happen. Do it now. Is figure out how to make things happen so you can actually get there, because it really is worth the trip.
Thank you, Lonnie. And now we're going to go back to Terry, talking about S for specific.
And we have a question.
Specific.
um,
Sure.
that says, will you discuss negative splits as a SMART goal?
Sure. Yes, because doing negative splits is a type of a goal.
And it's on the
It's
slide
one of
called measure-
those. Yep, it is a measurable goal, absolutely. But starting out, you want to decide, is there a distance that you'd like to do? Is there a certain event that you want to do? We've been talking about no frills as a specific ride for a green horse and whether it's appropriate. There might be a ride that you have on your bucket list that you want to do. You can set an event, you can set a distance, you can set that you want to go from the distance you're at to the next level up. You can say that, I've never done a mountain ride, I want to do a mountain ride. You can say, I've never done a ride in the sand, I want to do a ride in the sand. You can say, I'd like to do, go to Maine and ride, 3 days of the Pine Tree Ride. Whatever the goal is, it can be for events, but it can also be for behaviors during an event. It can be that you want your horse to start by themselves. They've never done that before. You want to see how they behave. You want them to lead. You want them to follow. You want your horse to drink during the ride. Whatever your goal is, whatever your method is, say it out loud, write it on a calendar, put it in your journal. Some people are spreadsheet people. Put it on your spreadsheet. Whatever your method is, keep track of it. Note it down so that when you get there, you can say, check, we've done it.
Thank you, Terry. And now we're gonna go to M, measurable, and that's gonna be Lonnie.
So measurable is, again, you have to figure out what your parameters are. And I know we keep going back to the same thing, but when you start your endurance career there seems to be this cycle, is that you start out and it's kind of like running a marathon. When you first run a marathon, you're just so unbelievably tickled if you can finish. You don't care if you're top 30% or anything. You just want to finish. You're so tickled because you actually ran a marathon. And endurance riding is the very same thing, is that the thought of doing a 25 or a 50 or 100-mile ride is pretty, you don't even know how to start. You start up, you show up at the start line and you cross the start line, and that's how you start, because there's no guarantees. There's no way to proof everything. There's no way to say that I know if you ever say you know what you're doing, you're dead in the water. Because you're going to be learning for the next 20, 30 years and be amazed at how much you've forgotten and how much you didn't know, even though you've been doing this forever. But you want to know is when you first start out, what happens is you just want to finish, and you're sort of riding in the back, and you've got your tack is working out and your horse is working out and everything's good. And then you complete the ride and you do that a few times, and then you start moving up a little bit. I mean, this is just how it works, is people tend to move up, and then when you finally break into the top 10, and it back in the beginning, back in the 70s, when rides, there weren't quite so many rides, so the rides were much bigger. Back in the 70s, there were only 7 100-mile rides in the whole country, and now there's 80 of them or something. I mean, there's bazillions of them, but the rides were much bigger, and so the top 10% was a great big deal, because there might be 200 horses at the ride. And now we have so many rides to go to, so being in the top 10 horses is not quite as dramatic a significant achievement, but it's still something that we all get very, very, very excited about. And so you work up for top 10, and gosh forbid you win. And the problem with winning is there's only one place to go, and that's down. But you start thinking that you're pretty hot patootie, and then after a certain period of time, whether it's a year or 2 or 10, then you get a little burnt out, because it takes a lot of effort to be top 10, and it takes some of the fun out of it, because you're not in the back looking at turtles and learning about plants and watching birds and talking to your friends. You're really pushing a lot. So then you either burn out and leave the sport, or you back down and you start doing things like Terry says, is either riding with more people, bringing friends, bringing kids, you get very involved with bringing in new horses or rescue horses or things like that. And then you start really, really enjoying yourself in the last third of your, and there is no last third, but once you get past the greenhorn stage, which is fun but nerve-wracking, and then the speed stage is just plain nerve-wracking, and it's fine, but you're running the edge all the time. And then once you get to the I'm just going to have fun, it is unbelievably fun. And because the thing about COVID is that what we all minded most about COVID was not seeing our friends. It wasn't that we weren't able to compete, is that we couldn't come with our endurance family, because you come to endurance ride and you see your friends and you talk, and you these are people who you've known for decades, and that's what we really like, is the whole endurance family. So in terms of measurable, the concrete things are things like scores on your vet cards, is you want to be able to say, and when you're, again, for people who haven't done endurance before, is a vet card is a piece of paper that you carry with you, and hopefully it's a piece of Tyvek paper so it doesn't get wet and shred. But it's got spaces on it for different parameters, and your horse gets looked at the beginning of the ride before you even start, and then at every vet check, which is about every 10 to 15 miles, sometimes 20 miles, is the veterinarians will look at your horse again and say, I'm looking at your mucous membranes, and I'm looking at your skin pinch, I'm listening to your gut sounds, I'm looking at your soundness. And a perfect horse in all those parameters would get an A, but if you're getting a little bit dehydrated, you might get a B, or if your gut sounds are getting quiet, you know, or your horse isn't eating well, you might get a C, and a D means it's time to stop now. Let's not go any farther. Let's regroup and recover and go again another day. But so in a perfect world, and so we do examine the horses and write on your vet card at the beginning before you start, at every vet check, and then at the finish, is that when you cross the finish line, is some small reason to be excited because you can get off now, but you're not done until you go back to the vet and you go through the entire vetting procedure again and get your horse examined, and it has to be fit to continue. He has to be, okay, I would let this horse go back out on the trail and do another loop. So that when you're riding during the day, one of the nice things about getting used to this sport, is doing it for a long time, is you want your horse to be happy all the time, is to not feel stressed, is to not feel, I'm feeling shaky. I mean, it's okay to be physically stressed when you're climbing to the top of an 11,000 foot mountain and you're sort of weightlifting and their muscles are shaking, because that would happen, but then they get to recover at the top and then go down the other side, things like that. But you want to, you want your horse to be eating. For me, the biggest measurement of my horse's current status is whether he's eating. And it's really fun when you're at the no frills. The no frills doesn't work so much, but when you're at the Old Dominion and we're at the Fort Valley ride, is we trot the horses out a lot on grass. And it's really fun when you have trouble getting all the way down, turned around at the end, and all the way back without your horse trying to graze, because that means they're hungry, and a hungry horse is a healthy horse, and you're managing him well, and you're maintaining his hydration, and you're maintaining his fluid balance, and you're maintaining his gut motility. And so to me, the biggest thing for me is if they're eating, and we're not just eating a little bit, if they will take your hand off if you put it in the wrong place, to me, that's a happy horse and a healthy horse. So the scores on the vet cards are good. The veterinarians only see your horse again every 10 or 15 miles. And they say, yes, this looks good, that looks good. So all A's is good, but you know more than anybody else how your horse is doing at every step of the way, whether he stopped going up the hill, which he never does, or whether he stopped going up the hill, and he always does that, or whether he was pokey going down the hill and reluctant and tried to go sideways. I mean, the vet's not going to see those things, because when you're vetting your horse, is you're trotting him in hand. And so the vet says, without a rider's weight on him, on a flat surface, on soft footing, your horse looks excellent. And you're thinking, oh my gosh, when I was riding on the rocks, he was favoring his left front. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. But so scores on the vet cards are one way to measure. When she says recovery times, that means that when you come in off, and recovery times is again a measure of how well you have conditioned your horse and how well you are riding your horse on that day. Because you'll ride, you'll at the start, they say on your mark, get set, go, and you watch everybody else go, and you wait about 10 minutes, and then you sneak out to make sure that you get to actually ride your own horse instead of the other 50 horses in front of you. But so you'll ride the first 15 miles, and then you come into the first vet check, and you say, how do I know I'm getting the vet check? It's, well, you'll have looked at the map. Sometimes you might even be able to see it as you're coming down the mountain. Or you're just watching your time and you say, I know I'm coming into the vet check. And so when you come into the vet check, say you're coming off the trail into a field, is the first time you'll get is one called the arrival time, which just means you stepped off the trail into the field. And then you have up to 30 minutes to get your pulse down to 64. But the goal is to get it down right away. And so the horses who are, because that allows you to continue on down the trail quicker, is that once your horse's pulse comes down to 64 or whatever the parameters are determined to be that day, then your horse can start its rest time and go back out on the trail. So your goal is to come in off the trail, to take your horse's pulse and say, whoops, he's 64. I'm ready to go straight to the vet and I'm ready to go. But if you're riding either a heavier horse or a horse who's not quite as fit, or it's super hot, or it's been a particularly difficult trail, then you'll come in and you say, oh my goodness, he's at 72. I need to cool him down. And it takes you maybe 10 minutes or so to cool him down. And that's not a bad thing, but it is something. Recovery times are actually almost more exciting than scores on the vet cards, because if you can bring your horse off the trail, hop off, loosen the girth, take his pulse and say, yep, he's right. Oh, I have to take the saddle off because they're telling us that we have to take tack off every time. But if you can walk straight into the vet, that is absolutely a goal, because it means that you have conditioned your horse correctly and you're riding him well for the weather and the terrain that you're doing. So it means you're thinking and he's following along saying, yeah, you're doing this right. You're doing this right. Because again, that's the time from your in timer to the vet check, which is your recovery times. And I think one of my proudest hundreds is we were riding the Gothi 100 down in Florida, and I was actually riding a half Belgian horse. So she was half Belgian draft horse. And in the entire 24-hour ride or the entire 100-mile ride, her recovery time for all 7 vet checks was a total of 13 minutes,
Wow,
which means that
That's
from,
awesome.
that's
and
awesome.
then that's pretty exciting because sometimes it can take me 13 minutes at one vet check.
Right.
And so it just means that you're not pushing them hard enough to have them say, I'm stressed, I need to rest before my pulse will come down. And so that is something that you want to measure and say, I'm getting better at this. And that's again a knowledge thing, is you say, I know how to manage my horse so I can do this. Because there are some horses who don't like this sport, and you will find them. So if you have to, because this sport, horses love it because they're getting to see new things, new terrain, new people. They pull into the base camp and they look out the window and they say, and you can hear them say this, they say, these are my people. I mean, they pull into the camp and they say, this is going to be awesome. And they don't hide in the corner of their trailer. They don't say, oh my gosh, I have to do this again. Is they like this sport because you get as beat up as they do, and you're whinier than they are, and they get to eat all the time. They get to eat and drink anything they want. So they love this sport, but you want them to say, because I mean, that's sort of, we joke, but what we do at home is we open the gate and I say, who wants to go to a ride? And there's this big thundering herd, because they're all about food. Is they know if you get on the truck, you get to eat the whole way to the ride, you get to eat the whole way there. And so there's nobody hiding about this one. And that's the good part, is when you finish the ride and you can't get your horse's head up because it's eating so much that you say, I'm just going to sit here at the finish line with my clothes on because I can't stop him from grazing. That's a great day. That's a really, really positive day. And, so other things is you say, I know I always have trouble. So many of us have trouble with not girth rubs, but it's called chub rubs. Is that they're horses with kind of chubby armpits, and it's a constant battle of rawness in the armpits that if you watch it, the girth is nowhere near it. So a lot of us have trouble with chub rubs in the armpits of the horses, maybe the people too, but of the horses. But you're sort of looking for, my tack is perfect, I didn't break anything. I mean, so these are all things that you can actually measure. Is at first you're clueless. At first you're absolutely clueless. You don't know, and the only way to know this is to start.
Yeah.
You don't know if you're set. You don't know your clothes. Don't go out there and buy a bunch of clothes, and don't go out there and buy a bunch of tack. Ride what you have and wear what you have, and see what you want to change, because you may see something else. I mean, don't go out there and rush out there and buy a new trailer, because you'll find something else you want. So use what you have, and then say, okay, if I want to go faster, I'm going to need to do this. Or if I want to, I'm going to need to change my horse's diet or something. But there are so many things that you can measure that will increase that happiness of the sport, because happiness is when your horse is happy. It is absolutely the end of the world to cross the finish line for us. Now, other people are different. To cross the finish line with a horse who looks like crap, that is kiss of death, because you want the horse to come across the finish line with his ears up, his eyes bright, chatting with his friends, saying, oh my gosh, there's everybody, I thought I was all alone out here, and to have a good time, and to say, that was great, when do we get to go again? That's what makes it worth it for us.
I agree, Lonnie. I was thinking out at a ride with Blossom this last year. I had a vet totally look at me deadpan, Julia Wolf. And Julia has such a deadpan face, go, did you ride this horse? I'm like, well, yeah. But I realized what she was saying is because she's looked so good. She didn't even look like I'd ridden her. And that was a big moment of glory for me. When I made this slide, I added recovery for both as a rider. For me, learning how to do electrolytes for myself, so I wasn't in a lot of pain the day after doing a 50, was also a big thing for me. So I was learning how to take care of myself. That was one of the things I saw as measurable too, as how much less pain was I in after doing different things. but I love
And I
this.
think-
That's a big one, Sonia, because if you are fatigued and you are unfit, it's what I describe to my kids is, are you becoming a sack of potatoes on the back of the horse? Because if you are a load for them to carry instead of a partner, you're no good to them. So maintaining your own fitness and your own health and recovery is truly an important goal.
Okay,
And
Plus, it's no fun to feel like shit.
no, not at all.
And actually, I want to, since I don't know where the negative splits goes in, I'm going to make a brief comment about negative splits.
I was going to address that on the next one.
So I think if we each talk about our own concept, because the reason we always do negative splits is because we're always training all the time. And so the first hour is where you want to be very calm and very quiet. And if you really know what you're doing and you've got a horse who is experienced and mentally together, then go for it. On your mark, get set, go, and you're gone. But for us, it's always, I don't want to start with the herd because I don't want my horse to be part of the herd. I want him to be listening to me. So the ride starts at 7 and I might not walk out till 5 after, or maybe 10 after. And then we will walk like the first, and sometimes I'll walk until he settles, until his hump is out of his back, and until he's not scooting when people come up behind him, until he's listening. We might walk for 20 minutes or more until he says, okay, this is not a race. I mean, I realize endurance riding is a race, but most of us are trying to make forward progress in the longevity department. We want our horse to be fun to ride and to be with us for the next 20 years. So what a negative split is again, I ride the first lap at, so the first lap would be say at 5 miles an hour. The second lap, I go faster. So my second lap, I do it at 6 miles an hour, and I finally have it all together. And my third leg, like from the 40 mile to the 50 mile point, I do it at 9 or 10 miles an hour. So that's essentially what a negative split is you're shortening your time for each leg. So for us, we're always horrified because you'll look at your watch at the hour point and think, oh my gosh, I've only ridden 5 miles in the first hour. And I've learned over 40 years to just be calm, because I'm thinking if I'm only going 5 miles an hour, this ride is going to take me 12 hours, this 50-mile ride, and I really don't want to do that. But don't worry about it, because the first leg for me is settling them. Because if you go out of there like a rocket, then and they get the race brain thing, and their eyes get kind of dried out and kind of buggy, and they get kind of lean, and they're too busy to drink, and they're too busy trying to keep up, and they want to catch up with the group, and so they come to a creek and they don't stop to drink, or if you stop to graze, they don't stop to graze. Then it's not good. It's not good at all. So I want them to start the ride saying, oh boy, here we go, and I'm fine. And so once they're calm and they're moving, then we start to pick up the pace. So for the first vet check, say it's 15 miles, my first 15-mile leg, it's going to take me probably 2.5 to almost 3 hours. And you think, just kill me now. I am never going to finish at this pace. But then they come into the vet check, they get a 40-minute hold or whatever, and they eat and they drink and they're happy. And then we go out and say, okay, they are all business now. They are all business. So the next 15 miles is only going to take me 2 hours, and that's not even rushing. I mean, the second 15 miles, I do it in 2 hours because we're not having to walk out at the beginning. We're not having, we're all business. And then the last 15 to 20 miles, I think, okay, I actually have a lot of horse left. Either I think he's not eating well, he's puffing more, I need to back off, then I back off. But if I think I have a lot of horse left, he feels he is moving well, he is eating like a pig, his hydration is great, then I say, okay, you can go fast. Because I even don't, with my personal horse, I don't let him canter because he's very big and it burns a ton of calories. But in the last leg, I'm like, go for it, you're fine, because I know you've got what it takes. If he doesn't have what it takes, I walk him in. You adjust constantly. But so that's for me what negative splits is. We always do negative splits because I want to make sure that his brain is engaged in the first leg so that I can ride whatever I want in the second and third legs.
And
You have
thank
you have
Lonnie.
described it to perfection, Lanny, as usual. I do exactly the same mentality. The first leg is, hello, I'm the driver. because they do get very up with the crowd. So that first leg is all about making sure that I have a brain underneath me and not just a rocket ship. Second leg, or even the last half of the first loop, depending on whether it's a young horse or one that's more seasoned, we then make that switch to, okay, now I get it. We're going to be at this all day long. And they behave and they listen, and they're listening to aids, and they're following directions. And we're then moving at our training pace. Then the last loop is the one where I say, dude, if you still have it in you, you do you. And I'll just be here for the ride. Provided all things throughout the day have gone correctly, and we are still eating, still drinking. If they've got the juice to do it on the last loop, I'll let them have their fun. But I never, ever, ever ask for anything. I always take what they give me. I never ask for more. If you are having to kick your horse down the trail to make that negative split, you're doing it wrong.
Cool. I
Thanks,
learned something
guys.
today. Thank you.
We have a question. How do you know if your horse is not loving it? What are some of the common signs of a true non-endurance horse that you've all noticed with your own prospects or in observing others?
I can speak to that because I have one that's now a fantastic trail horse that does not do endurance. And it's a quarter horse Appaloosa that I thought would be a great endurance horse with the Appaloosa side. And she loves to go down trail, but she loves to go down trail and enjoy it and at her leisure. And when I started trying to train her for endurance, you could just tell she did not like it. She loves going out on trail now that she's just a trail horse. But when it was coming to, making her fit and trying to prepare her for an endurance ride, she was letting me know she did not like it.
I think that's the point, is you can hear them. Because as Diane says, is we have, the two examples would be, is I have a Connemara who is brilliant at everything, and he's a wonderful fox hunter, and you can put anybody on him, and there's nothing he can't do, and he's great at riding tie, but he thinks endurance is stupid because nothing's happening. And he says nothing's happening. And I actually did have another horse one time tell a communicator, he says, frankly, endurance riding is not mentally challenging. And I thought, whoa, okay, I'm a little embarrassed about this if he thinks that. But the Connemara I have is he just says, this is dumb. Nothing's happening. There are no foxes. There are no hounds. There's no horn. There's no galloping. And he will grit his teeth and do it. But he tells you right up front that it's not having any fun. And so he'll do it if he has to mentor or teach or pony another horse. But we don't make him do it because he tells you right out front. He says, this is stupid. But on the flip side, we have one who's going to be 4 on March 29th. And so we're hoping to take her to her first ride. And we're not going to get on her. We're going to have some little sticky endurance or eventing girl ride her, who's a wonderful rider. And I told her right up front, I said, I just want you to know what's going to happen is she's only 4. So she doesn't have the experience of continuing to keep going, like start at the beginning and don't stop till you get to the end. So I said the first, and we're going to protect her. We're going to have other horses around her. So she's with her friends and she's going to think this is heaven because she's seeing something new. And for about the first 10 to 15 miles, this is going to be the most exciting thing she's ever seen. And she's going to be looking up. And then about 15 miles, she is going to lay on the brakes and she is going to plant because she's half Belgian again. And she is going to say, this isn't fun anymore. There's a difference there. There's a difference between I'm suffering mentally and I want food and my mommy. And so when she hits the 15-mile point, because this is what our horses do, is she's just going to say, okay, that was fun, but I'm done. And the other horses will say, we're not done yet. You just keep going. And so that's a little bit different. If your horse plants and says, I'm not taking one step further, they don't get it. They don't understand that they can't just go home. I mean, there is a point to continuing on. And so for the first couple of rides, it's not uncommon for our horses to stop making forward progress or to stop on a hill or to stop what they're doing and say, I'm not doing this. And it's because they would rather be watching television, or they would, but that's the same thing as a 14-year-old teenager, is they don't see the big picture. They don't see the fun of driving to the Bighorn ride or driving to Colorado and seeing some amazing things and getting to eat all the way. And they don't see the big picture, because when they're young, it's normal to stop and say, this is stupid, I want to go home. And then the other horses say, you can stay here, but I'm leaving. And the kid says, oh, wait a minute, I'm coming with you. And then they get over it. So, so it's normal to have 1 or 2 or 3 rides for them to say, stopping doesn't work because I'm not home. It's not going to get me home. But if after the first 3 or 4 rides, you're still having to kick the whole way, that's not fun for anybody. That's not fun for anybody.
And the opposite side of that, the example I would give is my Morgan, who was a rescue, who nobody could ride because they were putting her in all these different disciplines. Her nickname was Energizer Bunny, 13 years, 98% completion rate. You could not stop that horse. You felt how much she loved to go down trail, and she could keep up with all those Arabs. She could recovered a little slower, but she kept up with everybody. You felt it under you how much she enjoyed the competition and being out there on trail.
Very cool. I think we're ready to move to slide 8. Good discussion.
That is achievable.
Slide 8 is achievable, and that's Diane.
So when you're setting a goal, a SMART goal, you want to make it achievable. If you're just thinking about getting into endurance, you don't want your first goal to be, I'm going to come in first. That's right, unless you have an outstanding horse or a very unusual horse. That's not an achievable goal. I mean, if you're getting into the sport, an achievable goal may be successfully taking your horse camping before ever taking it to an endurance ride, and getting it to stay in an electric fence, or getting it to learn how to high tie. That could be your very first achievable goal. Then once you meet it, you're setting your next one. When it's coming to your very first ride, you want that goal to be achievable. It may just be getting across the finish line in the allotted 6-hour time frame for a 25, or the 12-hour time frame for a 50. I will tell you, my very first endurance ride on that horse I was just talking about was Fort Armstrong, and not the right saddle, not the right clothing probably, and I finished it in 11 hours and 58 minutes. And swore I'd never do it again. And 2 weeks later, I was at my next 50. So when you're starting to set your goals, you can go very minute, very small, kind of like making a to-do list to get your house cleaned. If you say clean the house, it's just like too overwhelming to even think about it. But it's wash off the kitchen counters, vacuum the living room. So you want to break down your goals to making them very achievable. So it could be just finish that first 25 or that first 50. It could be achievable. Let's say you turtled your first ride, which I didn't, because I didn't know about the turtle, and I raced the guy in at the finish line and didn't get the turtle. But it could be that you want your next goal or achievable goal is to physically move up and finish middle of the pack. And probably one of the, and this kind of goes to those negative splits that Lonnie was talking about, learning to go slow to go fast. A lot about endurance is about riding smart, so that when you come into the vet check, I watch people ride very smart. They ride slower. They come into the vet check. They go right into the pulse box. They go right to the vet. And all of a sudden they're back out on trail 10 minutes ahead of somebody that had come in ahead of them. Well, now they're leapfrogging those people. I've actually, as a ride manager, had somebody come up to me and tell me somebody must have cut trail because they were in front of them. Well, it wasn't that. It was that they came into the vet check slower. They had ridden their horse properly for the weather. Their horse's pulse was down. They went right to the vet, and they were out on trail 10 minutes ahead of that person who trotted their horse in. So again,
not to interrupt you, Diane, but as a general rule, my goal is to pass people in the vet check, not on trail.
right.
And we do it regularly.
And- and
Sorry, I cut you
think-
off.
And when I was talking about achievable goals, I was writing my own notes here, and Terry's already alluded to it, or Lonnie did, about Foxcatcher versus a technical ride. I have watched a lot of people make the mistake of doing their very first endurance ride at Foxcatcher. I love Foxcatcher, but it is all open field. You can see all the horses in the distance. And you, as I think Sonia said, you can it's palpable,
Palpable.
the high energy and the just the whole hype of the start, because it's wide open fields and you're just going around field after field. Where at a ride like No Frills, or even Rabbit Run, where Rabbit Run is a more flat ride. It is easier, but it at least is in the pine forest and you're on single track trail. So in setting achievable goals, you want to look at rides and plan based on your ability to be able to control the horse. You don't want to go to a ride that's all open fields if you have a horse that goes crazy, except on single track trail. Other achievable goals would be start with an intro ride, work your way up to an LD, work your way up to a 25. But again, I always think about achievable goals as small increments so that you can see your success and then set the next goal.
Beautifully said, Diane. Okay, now we're gonna go to R for realistic, and I'm gonna put that is my Belgian cross, that is Reuben. And I turtled the Old Dominion limited distance ride on this horse, but Lonnie's gonna talk to this slide.
Well, and so again, as Sonia has just said, is we don't understand what the word realistic means, because we wouldn't be here. Is that you need, if in order to do endurance, you need to dream big. And the dream big does mean that you're going to put your horse in the trailer and drive away from home and go 2 hours from home or 5 hours from home or 10, which is pretty scary. I mean, the whole thing is trailering in general, till you get used to it, is a little alarming. And camping with your horse and making sure it doesn't run off into the bushes is, but if you don't plan, it's not going to happen. And so also don't, so you need to dream big. You just need to say, I'm going to go do this right. And let me back up a little bit. Is we keep talking about Foxcatcher. The only reason we in the Old Dominion talk about Foxcatcher is it's the closest flat ride to us. Foxcatcher is a fantastic ride. It's very well run. We all go back year after year after year after year. So we're only picking on it because to us, I mean, if we live in Florida, they'd all be Foxcatchers. In Florida is a disaster for new horses because it's wide open, flat and sandy, and it's the best way to die. And so when we keep talking about Foxcatcher, it's only that it's the closest flat ride to us, and it's not actually flat, but it's not technical. And so everybody says, I'm going to start with an easy ride. And we're like, oh, no, you need to start with the ride with what Reuben's doing right here, that the terrain will slow you down and there's not 5 horses galloping up behind you because they're all picking their way through the rocks. And so if you want to start this sport, you will have way more fun in a mountain ride, or there's a Muckle Rats ride up in Pennsylvania in July. There's a lot of really great rides that are more in the mountains and more in the woods than they are in the open, but we're not picking on Foxcatcher. But
And I did preface Foxcatcher's a great ride, but I would not recommend it for a first ride.
Yeah, it's just because everybody and their mother goes there because it's so much fun. But so reality is important, and so what she's writing here is a Belgian, and of course I'm very partial to Belgians, and in fact everybody who's on this webinar is got goals besides speed, because what she's writing here is safety, brain power, fun, durability, and just powerhouse, as opposed to yeehaw, I didn't fall off, this is great. But so there is something, so some things can't be overcome. I mean, if somebody says that horse will never be a 100-mile horse, oh boy, game on. I mean, you that is your goal for the rest of your life. If somebody says that horse will never be able to go in the heat, ooh, well, watch me, just watch me. Things like that. But there are some things you can't overcome. So you do have to be realistic, is that if your horse, because this is absolutely a no drug sport. And so we do drug testing, but we don't need to do drug testing because the horses tell you, I'm not doing this. But so if you have noticeable hock arthritis, or if you have noticeable kissing spines, or if you have health issues, if you've had chronic Lyme disease, there are various things with a horse that they just can't do this. It's not fair. If you have a horse who's conformationally a disaster, I mean, conformation, so sure, there are perfect looking horses, but a lot of horses who paddle or who wing or who pigeon-toed or do whatever, they do just fine because you're not asking them to run around in tiny little circles for hours and hours at a time. They're going down the trail in a free moving forward motion, which is, and watch it. I mean, this horse is using his back end, he's using his sacroiliac, he's engaging his hind end, so he's helping his back. This is a good sport for them, but sometimes they can't do it because there are no drugs. I mean, because you can't give them anti-inflammatories, you can't give them steroids. I mean, you just don't do that. I mean, you can give them water and you can give them electrolytes, you can give them vitamins, and that's it. And so if your horse has an arthritis problem, it's probably not going to work out just because it's not fair. I mean, you're not riding for an hour, you're riding for 5 to 10 to 20 hours at a time. Or if your horse has a neurologic problem, it's dangerous. You're out there and not on a flat surface. So sometimes the goal is not suitable, but other than that, the sky is the limit. You need to make a plan, and you need, whether it's, I mean, because I do have a current horse now in my plan for him, and I'm going to keep going forward until I'm stopped. My goal is always the Old Dominion 100 for all my horses. And until something stops me, which is, okay, I can't surpass this. I can't get over this. And all my horses have the goal of being number 100 mile horses and number 2, the Old Dominion 100, because that's just my family. I mean, that's where we are. And I think I always like to say, it's one of the easiest 100-mile rides out there because there's not very many 100-mile rides that you start and the only way to get home is to finish. A lot of rides are made, they're loop rides, like you'll go out and make a loop and then the vet check is back at base camp, and then you'll make another loop and your vet check is back at base camp. And that's very, very convenient for personnel, for keeping your veterinarians all in one place, and for your management to not have to have people scattered all over the place. But it sure is easy to stop. If you do 2 loops or you do 3 loops, and you're like, oh man, I'm done, I'm bored. You're right at home, you're right at your trailer. You might as well stop. But when you're on the Old Dominion, the best way to get home is to just keep going forward. And it's very, very doable because on the Old Dominion, you ride the first 50 miles and sort of go north. And then at the 50-mile point, you make a right turn and you turn south, and your horse can smell home 50 miles away. And it's all they know where they're going. So at that 100 is very doable, because people say, oh, it's rocky or it's hot. No, it's mentally very, very doable. But so be realistic, but don't ever be limited by what somebody says you can and can't do. Because we've all been told that horse will never make this or will never make that. And you don't know until you try. You don't know until you try, and you keep moving up, and you'll find out that this horse is able to do a lot more than you think it is. And so you need to make a plan, but don't stick to it, because if you make a plan and you have a goal, but then if it doesn't work out, then switch. If your goal is this ride you're going to go to the Ride Between the Rivers at the first weekend of August, and that is your goal, but then your truck breaks down, or you get COVID, or your mother got sick, or whatever, change plans, pick another ride. I mean, that's the advantage of this is there's nothing less successful than being rigid. Is if you say, there's nothing more boring. The people who first start this ride, they're the people you don't want to hang with, because you'll say, hey, Sonia, you want to go for a ride? She says, I can't. Wednesday is my speed day. I can't. Wednesday is my long distance day. And you're like, oh, come on, lighten up, just go ride. But it's a phase we all get through. But so make realistic goals, but realistic is, I'm just going to get out there, because other than that, truthfully, the sky is the limit. If you say, I want to buy in 2023, I want to have a truck and trailer that I trust to drive to California, and I want to do one of the 5-day Pioneer rides, do it. There's nothing to stop you from doing that, except there's nothing. Go. But if you want to, it's hard to imagine, but if things don't work out, is like, say you're going to the No Frills ride and your horse gets an abscess 2 weeks before, this is not a disaster. It's a tiny, tiny blip in the middle of things. And if you can, go and volunteer. And whether it's even just holding a gate for the Forest Service at the 30-mile point or something, or whether it's timing, or whether it's scribing for a veterinarian, is when things don't work out, that's when you learn the most. So if your truck breaks down, your trailer needs work, you can't go, something's not happening, jump right in and do something else. Volunteer to cook. I mean, there's just, you wouldn't believe it, but that's when you meet people and you see people and you learn the most. Is actually, you learn the least when you're riding. You learn the least when you get on your horse and you're droning around and you're riding. You learn the most when you're standing in the vet check, watching people come in. And as Diane was saying, you watch people come in and how they brought their horses in and how they handle them and how they are able to go straight to the veterinarians. One thing we haven't specified, because we're assuming that everybody's an endurance rider, but you may ask, how do you pass people in the vet check? This is totally off topic, but the way you pass people in the vet check is in an endurance ride. You ride, I'm going to say 15 miles, however long the first leg is, and the leg is determined by the parking areas. Is that we can't just automatically stop you at 15 miles. We have to be able to stop you at a place where there's enough place to get the cars in and the horses in and the horse trailers and things like that. So we're going to ride, say, 15 miles, and then there's a mandatory rest stop for the horse. And so the horse and you're told in advance how long the rest stops are, and they're usually about, say, 90 minutes of rest in the total 50-mile ride. So say the first vet check is a half an hour, but your hold time, the mandatory half an hour, doesn't stop until your pulse comes down to 64. That's called a gait. So it's called a gait into a hold. Is you coming off the trail, and then the gait, which is not a physical gait, but the gait is my pulse is down to 64. Okay, now my 30 minutes is starting. And then as soon as my 30 minutes is over, if I so choose, you don't have to rush out, but if I so choose, I can be on the horse and out the gate at 30 minutes over and I'm gone. So the way Terry passes people is that 5 people will come in or 10 people will come in and they'll come roaring in and they'll jump off their horse at the end timer and they'll wave their card and they'll get their time written on, and then they'll run over to their and they'll start sponging the horse, and Terry comes sauntering in about 8 minutes later and her horse is already cooled down. So her horse's pulse is already at 64 when she comes in the gate. And so she'll say, whoop, okay, so I'm going straight to the vet. So she comes in, she goes straight to the vet. Her 30 minutes has started. And so she's going to go 30 minutes later, she's going to ride out. And so these people who came in faster or whose horses weren't quite as fit or maybe weren't managed the same way, is that they are sponging and they're throwing water and they're taking tack off and they're doing this and that. And so they might not start their 30 minutes for 10 minutes after Terry. So without even noticing, because she certainly didn't look over there. She didn't look over there and say, oh, look at those suckers. No, she's just focused on her horse and she takes him to the vet and she says, my horse needs some food. So can we move this along? Because he is starving. And so she comes in off the trail, goes straight to the pulse, goes straight to the vet, and then the horse gets a 30-minute rest and then it leaves. And in the meantime, there's a pile of people over here on the side who are floundering around who haven't been able to start their 30 minutes because their pulses weren't down. So they do get their pulses down eventually. And then Terry goes out at the end of her 30 minutes and she's trundling down the trail. And about 8 minutes later, this herd of horses go, and they all come galloping past her because they finally managed to get out of the vet check. And you do this the whole day, is that you leapfrog because you're passing people in the check and they're burning calories passing you on the trail. I'm not saying these people are wrong. This is just how they ride. Is that they're burning calories by passing you at the trail on the trail. And then the same thing happens at the next vet check. Is there, you come in and you walk right in and you walk right past them, even though you don't pass them, but you pass, that's how you pass a horse in the vet check. But so working at a vet check is you watch this stuff happening and you watch the day unfold and you're thinking, okay, I'm learning a lot here. I'm learning how people ride affects their horse's happiness and their success rate and however they're measuring their success.
Lanny, I'm gonna, you've been using us as an example, and you've been describing this very calm, very,
Yeah, well,
we
no.
walk in and but that's how we roll. Like things like removing pack, and I see that little question popped up in the Q&A. Very often, and I'd say 90% of the time, it is a requirement to take pack off to go to the vet check. In cooler weather, the vets may tell you that you can leave tack on. And they tell you that because they don't want you stripping the horse naked and having backs get cold. So that would be a reason why they would say you can leave tack on. Most often tack comes off. So part of our process and part of what we look at, and I keep saying we, anybody can find me at a ride because I always have, as someone has described, I have, quote, half the state of Maryland with me. I have my kids that I mentor. I have people from a barn down the street. I have the kids' parents. Like I travel in a mob, and everyone has a job. And we practice. The tack comes off in a very specific way. Before I'm even on the ground, I'm unclipping the breast collar that's on the saddle. And then this person is going to do this, and this person's going to do that. So we're not stepping on each other. There's no frantic stuff happening, because if you are frantic, your horse is frantic. They wonder what on earth is going on, that all this hubbub is happening, and their pulse is going up, not down. So remaining calm, keeping focused, pulling that tack piece by piece in order to get them cool. And the faster you can do those things, the faster you can check the pulse and make sure it is down, and then get to the vet. I crewed for a rider once who was a nerve cell, and I had to say to her, step away from the horse. You are making this worse. Go find a chair, get away from us. If you want me to crew for your horse, let me do my job. Let me help him. And as soon as she walked away, the horse was like, oh, thank God. Because that franticness from the rider made him crazy. So that calm attitude, that focus on your job, that definitely helps you get where you need to be.
And if I can just interject there, as Terry's talking about all her minions, if you're new to this and you're hearing that, many of us ride 90% of our rides with no crew at all. The Morgan I was talking
Yes.
about,
One of them.
I think at least 90% of those rides I rode by myself, making what Terry's talking about in the vet area and the crew area more critical, that you're very organized, that your horse will stand still, that you can pull your own tack off and check your pulse and then take it right on in. So if you're new to endurance, and Terry's talking about this whole village that she has, you can do this without having that village, and you can be very successful at it.
Yes.
It's
Yes,
just easier if you have
can. You don't have to have people. I travel, it's not so much that it makes it easier, because there's the whole management aspect that goes along with the kiddos, but it certainly does make it fun when you have people in your camp.
Yes.
So, but if you have to do it yourself, you can do it yourself. Just make a plan and stay focused on your plan. And as Lenny has said numerous times, be flexible. If you can't roll with the situation, you're going to have a very bad day. So whatever happens, just figure it out and move on.
Yes. Move forward. And we're going to move forward with our slides to 10 with timely. And I added a picture of the ARC calendar with some of our rides, because when I first got started, I would finish a ride and I'd go back to the ARC calendar and say, when's the next ride? When's the next ride? So I think a lot of us do that, but this is going to be Diane.
Okay, and the final with SMART goals is making your goal timely, meaning that it's achievable, it's realistic, and you have a deadline on when you're going to try to achieve it. To say I'm going to do an endurance ride, but never make a plan on which one you're aiming for, and therefore backtracking and figuring out your conditioning. So part of why she put the calendar up here is, if your goal is to do your first endurance ride, then you want to look at the calendar. And I would recommend that you actually learn about these different rides. You often will see somebody put a post on Facebook can somebody tell me about the terrain at Rabbit Run, or the terrain at Foxcatcher? Is it mountainous? Is it flat? Is it sandy? A lot of your planning for a timely goal, but even if you go back to the one about camping with your horse successfully before ever doing an endurance ride, you might want to try that a month before you try your first endurance ride, so that you take a calendar, and your goal might be to do no frills, which is April 15th. Well, then you need to go back and figure out, do you have time to do enough conditioning to have the horse ready for that ride? Sonia has actually put two really nice links on this slide. One about getting prepared, and it's an article in Endurance News about conditioning. And the other is about preparing for your first ride. These are two hyperlinks that'll take you right to these articles that would help you set some timely goals. But when we talk about timely, it's, don't set a arbitrary goal that's kind of out there in the cloud and you never get there. You want to set it and set a deadline of when you want to achieve it, so you can then work backwards on what you need to do to get to that goal by that time, whether it's your first ride, your first camping trip with your horse. And it could be like Lonnie was saying, you don't need a big, huge rig. You've got to tag along and you just put a cot in the back to camp. How far away from home do you want to travel? If you can only travel up to 2 hours away from home, then you look at the calendar and find rides that are within your diameter from home that you are willing to travel. And then as you get more experienced, you might be setting a goal to travel further. I know that before I retired, the only rides I did was Foxcatcher, Rabbit Run, the OD, No Frills rides that were within about a 3-hour radius. And when I retired my first year, I went to Maine, I went all the way out to Indiana, I went all the way down to Florida. I saw the whole East Coast on horseback. But again, that's setting goals that you can reach and setting timely goals that are achievable within a time frame, so that you can then set your next goal.
We have a question about No Frills for a green horse. Is this a green bean friendly ride? They've only done one.
Absolutely.
I was gonna say, I can talk about that. I'm a former green bean, and No Frills is definitely very green bean friendly. And if you tell people you're a green bean, you're gonna have a lot of people come help you. But Terry, what were you gonna say?
We give out the green ribbon.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
And Sonia actually organizes and oversees our intro ride.
yes, I do.
Sonia will take the green beans under your wing. We usually give out green ribbon for you to put on if it's your horse's first ride, putting it in their tail so everybody knows he's a green horse. You put green on you and you will have so much help, you won't know what to do. And for those that are unfamiliar with No Frills, all the vet checks are away at a very remote location. So you actually can't have crew. Instead, people that volunteer come out there and run, including some of Terry's minions, help me run that. And we provide everything. We provide the grain, the water, snacks, sandwiches for humans, water for humans, Gatorade for the humans. We are
Last year,
very,
the kids were
very,
even providing trot out services.
yes, trot out services. And I have seen people see somebody come in trouble, and it's obvious it's their first ride, and do you need a blanket? Can I hold your horse? Or actually start giving advice. Hey, let's go get some electrolytes and put some electrolytes in this horse. So yes, it's extremely friendly to everybody, and especially green beans. And I'm the ride manager.
And we have a shout out from the Green Bean director, Griffin Keller, who says that they're there often.
Yes.
And
And
we have a question of, isn't it harder if the vet check is away?
Not
No
really.
way.
I
Yeah.
will say
No.
it, No Frills, no, because we provide everything. You just send out a bag with some a sweat sheet in it, maybe an extra girth, and your electrolytes, and Everything else you could think of is there. We have soaked beet pulp. We have hay, very good quality hay. We have 2 different kinds of grain. And like I said, water, Gatorade, sandwiches, granola bars, snacks, you name it.
Carrots
we
and
have
apples.
providers. What did you say?
I said also carrots and apples.
Yes,
my-
carrots, apples. When I remember to
Yeah.
get them.
My experience, as Lonnie said it earlier, like with Old Dominion, because it's a point-to-point ride. What I discovered, at least with one of my mares, is that at the Away Vet Check, you're not at camp. Sometimes when you get to camp, when you're at there, vet checks are in camp, and then you have to tell your horse, we're going out again. Your horse says, no, I don't think so. I'm done. At No Frills, they're like, oh, we're stuck outside. Well, we're gonna go back to camp. So that's been my experience. Lonnie, you were saying the same thing, that sometimes the horses do better with the Away Vet Checks too.
Right, because I think what people think is they like to have all their stuff around them, is you like to be able to know that you theoretically could go back to your trailer, et cetera, et cetera. But that happens so infrequently. I mean, you really, what you need is you need your horse to be able to eat and drink and to have the electrolytes it needs, and for you to be able to take care of yourself, and all that is provided for, because it's much more fun. It's much, I mean, because you think that you want to have your stuff, but it's much more fun to feel like to feel like you are traveling. You're not just running around on a treadmill. Because to me, that a ride that keeps, and the Biltmore is an example of a ride when you do the 100, and it's a wonderful, gorgeous ride that it's extremely well managed, but all the vet checks are back at camp. And so you 7 times you make a loop and you come back to camp, and then you come back to camp, and you finally have to beat your horse out of camp, because the horse is like, if you can't find your way, you go on ahead, you go do the loop and I'll wait here for you. And
Especially when you have to go past your trailer to go back out on trail.
Oh,
and-
yeah.
Yeah.
so you feel like you're not actually covering much ground. Whereas if you're doing a point to point ride, you feel like I am seeing things. I'm going from this town to that town, or I'm going from this, I see this mountain over there and that's where I'm going to be next. So it really is a lot more fun. And so it's alarming at first, and you don't know what to pack. And so you just, I mean, as she was saying, you don't need to, as the ride manager was saying, you don't need to pack stuff, but you'll pack whatever your electrolytes your horse needs. Okay, so that's one little bundle of things. And then you might send a dry shirt, or you might send some dry socks, but you're sitting there thinking, well, what will I need if they're providing everything? And so you'll send everything there, and then it'll come all back in the bag, and you won't have actually touched any of it. So it's a fun way to get started, because then you're much more comfortable with it.
And
Yeah,
let me
and if
clarify,
you-
let me just clarify, at No Frills, it's 1 Away Vet Check. So you're riding out to it. It's 18 miles for the 50. It's 10 miles for the 30. After that vet check, you actually leave going further away from camp and do a huge lollipop and come back into the exact same spot for your second vet check. And then, as we mentioned earlier, the final loop is actually just a straight line straight down the Forest Service Road across 55 and in a 1.5 mile grassy double wide trail. So again, it's one location that you go into, leave going out in the opposite direction, and come back into it, and then head back to camp.
Right.
Yeah,
And the
so
things you worry
the-
about, because what happens is you're like, what if I have to pee? There somebody standing right there saying, can I bring you something? You say no, but can you hold my horse while I go pee?
Mhm.
Or if there's just so much help there that, and you say, can I have another cup of grain for my horse? Zoom, somebody runs off and runs back up the hill and gives you another cup of grain for your horse. So you don't have to worry about, I will be standing there flapping around, not knowing what to do. You'll be fine.
Right. There's also less distraction, because when you get into a camp where you have your trailer, your brain starts thinking about, organizing the trailer for when you're done for the day, or you're sifting through the 50 blankets that you brought, or, you're doing some other thing. I only send to the Away Vet Check things that are personal to me that I can't possibly get somewhere else. So my electrolytes go to the vet check. A cooler for my horse in the event that the weather requires it. I am a Diet Pepsi junkie. So that is something I make sure that is there in my little kit waiting for me. And I have seen people who have food allergies or food aversions, and they pack their little special snack. There you go. If
That's
you
me.
can't have, generic food, then go ahead and pack whatever that little special thing is. Or if there is something that, you'll just have a meltdown if you can't have a Snickers bar, then make sure your Snickers bar is in your kit. After that, you come into the vet check and you get to sit and you watch your horse eat, and someone holds it while you pee, and you're there just having a leisurely time with your horse. There is nothing else to distract you or draw your attention other than taking care of you and your horse in that hold. So that particular ride and away vet check makes your life so much easier. So I
And-
definitely, I recommend it.
We have lots of thank yous for that.
Well-
Because people were concerned about away vet checks.
Right, and because
It's
the other
so
thing about,
scary. So
because the other thing about no frills is there is a farrier at the vet check. So if you lose a shoe, you're not standing there. And also if you forget something at this ride or any ride, it's a total non-issue because you turn to the person next to you and say, do you have extra electrolytes? And I'm like, yep, got enough for 5 horses here, because we all travel with, so if you say, my cracker got smashed and wet, can I have some food? Yeah, you just turn to the person next to you and we've all got plenty.
it's also the way the vet check is set up. It's a fairly, I don't want to say small area, but it's not 3 football fields wide, as in you are, 20 feet from the next rider. So if you are a new person to this sport and you want to meet people, you are thrust into the ultimate networking situation, because there are people next to you, across from you, that, we're all willing to chat about what we do and how our loop went and what we're going to do on the next loop. All you have to do is say, hi, and you'll get a litany of all the information you never wanted to know.
If you ever say, does anyone have Desitin, you'll end up with 20 tubes of Desitin.
I just did a quick search, and we have a YouTube channel now that has our previous webinars, links to them. What I will do is, for the people, if you're a participant, you got an email from us, I will send this YouTube link out to you guys, so you can actually go and click on some of our previous webinars about the when shit goes wrong and Endurance 101 and what mountains are hard. That's some other clarifying information in there for you too.
And we did one specifically on the Old Dominion crewing technique, since it is point to point, and with the rides being crewless. And so that is a whole nother webinar.
So great information. We have a question of, is the No Frills intro the same as the Old Dominion intro? And it's different trail systems, but I think it might be difficulty or, the type of trail. And then there's also a question of, should you condition a lot for an intro ride if it's in the mountains? So it's kind of combined questions.
Well,
any of the Old Dominion rides assume there are rocks, assume there are mountains. That is going to happen because they're all in the same geographical region. So you're going to end up seeing different pieces of the same mountain range.
Well, and I'll speak to No Frills intro ride is the first 10 miles of the 30 into that away vet check, and you will actually have a courtesy vet check, and then you will ride the 8-9 miles back to camp on the Forest Service Road. So it's an 18-mile intro ride. This year we are not having an intro ride at the June ride because of the national championship. We will have an intro ride at Fort Valley And again, that one is part of one of the loops of the 30-mile ride.
So with regard to conditioning for that, you just heard Diane say that you're going to do the first loop, which is 10 miles, and it's 10 miles of climbing. Literally had a new to the Old Dominion rider with me at one point, and we were climbing and climbing and climbing, and we hit a plateau, and we turned a corner, and it went up again, and she said to me, "You've got to be shitting me." Because she didn't realize that it could continue to get any taller. So should you condition? Yes, you should be fit to do anything that you undertake with your horse. So if you've never, ever seen a mountain, try to plan at least to do some little hills that are close to you, or, you know, take a weekend and go ride with a friend who does have a mountain nearby. Or, you know, just plan to be ready. It's an 18-mile ride. You don't just pull out of a pasture and plan to be fit to do that 18 miles. The point of an intro ride is not to take the 12 hours that people have the 50 to do. You want to ride that distance in the time allotted.
Okay, thank you, Terry. We're gonna move on to the next slide. And this is one about the rewards that we can get in this slide, and some of the fringe benefits. And
So I
Lonnie,
think that, so one of the things that if you are successful, if you finish a ride or you top 10 or you win, don't forget what it took to get there. Don't say, well, I've always given him electrolytes the night before and at every check, but I think he's doing fine. I don't think he needs that anymore. Or so if you are successful, keep doing what you're doing. Don't forget what you're doing. And also don't assume that you know anything. Don't assume you know what you're doing, because we're all just lucky. I mean, every time you put your horse in a trailer and get to a ride and get to do the ride, you're lucky if everybody comes back in one piece. And that's not because of endurance riding. That's because the world is a dangerous place. I mean, a meteorite could fall on you. So every time you get to go out with your horse and come back in one piece, it's a blessing and a joy. And so our goals, all of us here, our goals are to have a healthy and a happy horse, regardless of the finishing time. But then you do start coming up with some other things. And like one time we had a goal, as I said, I want to ride 1,000 miles this year of competition. And in order to do that, you have to branch out. So one of the rewards is, number one, meeting a lot of people, seeing a lot of amazing territory, because our sport is divided up. It used to be 7 regions. I don't know how many regions AERC has. And we keep talking about AERC, and hopefully you all have looked at it. It's the American Endurance Ride Conference. It has a fantastic website, aerc.org. And if you just keep clicking around on that, it'll tell you how much electrolytes to give and how much calcium to give, and it'll give you all kinds of education, and it keeps track of all of our records. It's a supremely superior web organization, but it also, what it does is it keeps track of all from the first time you cross the start line, from every mile you've ever done through all your decades. It keeps track of those and racks them all up. I've always said that it would be a heck of a lot easier to go to the store and buy myself a pretty expensive cooler and take it to an embroidery place and have Champion of the Universe embroidered on it than it would be to chase points. I mean, because what happens is, with every ride you do, you get a certain number of points per mile, and then other points, like in terms of speed, or I can't remember how it works. Or maybe the longer the miles, like in the shorter rides, you get 1 point per mile, and maybe in the medium rides, you get 2 or 3 points per mile. There's some system there, but they really do keep track of all that. And then so you can, if you look in the AERC website or in the magazine, the Endurance News magazine, which is fabulous, that they send out, they list the per region. So you're not necessarily competing with somebody from Arizona or from Southern California who has a million rides available to them. You're competing with people from your region. So you can always check and say, oh, I'm actually fourth, and because also we're divided up into lightweight, featherweight, we're divided up into weight divisions. And so again, somebody who weighs, what do we call them? Tiny heinies, somebody who weighs 114 pounds is not
Feather
competing.
Feather.
Right, is not competing in the same division of somebody who weighs 250 pounds. And so you're divided up into weight divisions and region divisions, and then there are also national awards. But our true awards is again branching out and seeing, as Diane says, is you might do the same rides every year because those are your familiar rides where you know the people and you know the terrain and you know the parking and you know where to park so you don't get stuck, et cetera, et cetera. But then given an opportunity, you do try to branch out and you say, I do want to go ride this ride in Missouri. Or this past year, for the first time, I never ever thought I would do this in a million years. We went to Detroit and I thought, really, an endurance ride in Detroit? And they were the most nicest people on the planet.
Aw.
And the trails were gorgeous and the horses had so much fun. And I thought, Detroit, really? And it's something that you would go back to every year because it was just a super nice group of people. Or you can go to Mississippi. I mean, it's hot in Mississippi, but they've got great people. The Southeast people are the nicest people. So you travel around the regions. And if you're lucky, you meet somebody who says, hey, I'm going to be out at the Swanton Ride, or I'm going to be out in the Pacific Northwest. Do you want to come out and ride? And that is the true reward of seeing these things. Because there was something that came across the computer this morning, and it was one of those nature things, one of those little nature picture things. And they were talking about how transient happiness is if you buy a new car or you get new jewelry or you make more money. But it says the real happiness, when you have the really uplifting emotions, is it says amazement, wonderment, and awe are the foundations of real happiness. And so it's when you're riding 100 and it's taking you a while, because it should, and you're enjoying every step. Okay, you're not enjoying miles 60 to 70, but you get past that point. And then what happens is if you ride long enough, you get to watch the second sunrise. Is you've been out there all night and you're getting close to home and you've got 5 miles to go and it's 5:30 in the morning and the sun starts to come up and you get to see your second sunrise and your horse's ears are up and they're chirping along and they're like, I can smell home, I can smell food. And you always start to cry at that point. And that's one of those things where amazement and awe is right there. Is you're like, I cannot believe I'm doing this and he's doing this with me. And I'm never, ever going to forget this. And those are your real rewards, is when you come to the top of a mountain and you don't turn left or turn right and say, oh my God, it keeps going up. But you come to the top of the mountain and you look out, and that's where you get your sort of spiritual, holy camole, this is amazing that this is out here for me to be able to ride, for me to be able to see this. So that is the neat thing about endurance riding, is that you can go different places and see different things. And it doesn't have to be the West. It can be Detroit. I mean, you're like, this is bizarre, but this is amazing. But so seeing new regions is great. But for most of us, our true rewards are longevity. Is we want to have a horse that you don't just ride 1 year, because the first year or two of riding, endurance riding, I shouldn't say this, but it sucks. I mean, it's your horse gets loose, your horse spooks, your horse doesn't camp well. It takes them a while to learn to eat and drink. Learning to eat and drink while they're traveling, while they're resting at the ride, takes a long time. Learning to pulse down, learning to drink on the trail. So the first year or two can be sort of trying. And then you get a horse who you just love to be with. And you know that you're safe going out there by yourself, because if you came off, they will come back and get you. They won't just laugh uproariously and run off. But longevity in the relationship you have with your horse, and the pride that you have in a horse that you made yourself, that you either brought on from a little one, or you brought from a rescue pen, or you brought from somebody else, those are your real rewards. But AERC does give you a lot of jewelry. I mean, AERC, so some of the awards you can do as a decade team award is if you've been competing in an endurance ride. It doesn't have to be consecutive, right? Isn't it just
No.
10 years? So it doesn't
They
have to, so
they changed
years.
it, have a gap. It's 10 years total. You can have a gap in there.
like if you miss a year, but
You can now miss a year. It used to be consecutive. They've now changed it. And you can have a gap in the middle. I got decade
so-
on Harmony and had 2 years missing when I was taking care of my parents. So, yeah.
Yep. And that is something that people really try to go for is because it's not the fact that they give you a jacket that says it's a decade team. It's that people know that you take care of your partner and I always remember is back in the early days of the Old Dominion, there was a lady named Judy Van Meter, and she had a horse named Riff, Diamond Riffazar, and she rode the Old Dominion 100, and she wasn't fast. She wasn't slow. She just puttered along. And actually she called her team, her group of people, they were the buzzards because they just puttered along and picked off all the dead ones. But she finished the Old Dominion 100, and I don't think it was 7 years in a row, but it was pretty close to 7 years in a row. The 100-mile ride, a pretty tough, pretty demanding 100-mile ride. And she was somebody who I respected always because it meant that she took care of her horse, whatever he needed in order that he wanted to keep going over the next mountain for her. So that's so longevity, the longevity award, and isn't the longevity award, it's not endurance, it's both
A total of
LD
50 miles. It can be LDs or 50s, but it's just a total of 50 miles a year
for 10 years.
for 10 years. Yeah, that's my
Mhm.
then-
current
and
goal
then-
with Me and Blossom.
Yes, and because some people even are double decade teams, and some people have been competing their horse. They have ridden an endurance ride, a 50-mile endurance ride every year for 20 years. And that is true amazing. That is amazing. But
Well, Bob he just became a member of the Century Club last year.
Yes.
So that is where the combined age of the horse and the rider is 100. So that's a team that has been at it for a lot of years and are both still fit enough and happy enough and dumb enough to keep doing it.
and Bob keeps insisting he's only 60, right? So that
Yeah,
made
right.
sense.
He said the horse was 40 years old. Ah.
So AERC does keep track of your horse's mileage forever, and it does keep track of your rider mileage forever, which is, and again, it's nice to have milestones. It's nice to say I've hit 1,000 miles, I've hit 2,000 miles, I've hit 3,000 miles. It's a lot of fun to do that. Each individual ride, and again, we don't do one of the good things about endurance here in the United States is that there are no financial rewards. There's no money awarded for riding endurance because we don't want there to be any reason for you to push your horse for the prize you're going to get. And so many times you'll go out there and do a 100-mile ride and it will cost you $1 bazillion because you will have trained your horse for 5 years and you will have bought this very expensive truck and trailer and you will have taken off from work, et cetera, et cetera. It will cost you $1 bazillion and you'll ride the 100-mile ride and you get a t-shirt. But seeing as how there's so many other rewards out there, you're pretty happy with your t-shirt. And so a lot of so the Turtle Award is one that actually a lot of us, okay, not a lot of us, but some of us on this panel have a huge collection of Turtle Awards.
I do.
It's just what you get for finishing last. And they're just fun, and you save them and you pile them up and because you rode every minute that you could and you rode wisely and you finished. And something I've said on the previous webinars is that if somebody doesn't finish in time, they finish over time. What that means is they took care of their horse, is they didn't push their horse faster than it could go. They didn't sacrifice their horse's well-being in order for a completion, in order to say, yes, it's much more fun to say, I did the 50 or I did the 35 and I finished and I got a belt buckle or I got a t-shirt or I got a bag or something. But if you finish and you finish half an hour overtime and your horse is happy and healthy and eating and drinking, then you did a good job. And that gives you something to say is that I took care of my horse and I was good and we are perfect. And then I'm going to, and usually it's speeding up is actually not a matter of riding faster. It's a matter of being more precise, is not losing time here, not being more precise in the vet checks. So it's not hard to learn to make up time. There's also, of course, with ride awards, the first to finish is the first horse across the finish line. Then there's top 10. Best condition is it's measured in 3 different things. It's an equation using the time, finishing time, the weight that the horse carries, because a horse who's carrying 250 pounds gets a higher score than a horse who's carrying 110 pounds. And then the veterinary score. And the veterinary score is the veterinarians will examine the horse 1 hour after they cross the finish line and evaluate it for hydration and gut sounds and moving and, you know, forwardness and things like that. So the best condition is a very coveted award because it means that your horse out of the top 10 that finished is the one who came through looking like he hasn't been touched, that he feels terrific. High vet score is also pretty cool because it's of those horses is you may not have won best condition because you may not have been first, or you may not have been second, or you may only weigh 114 pounds. So it's hard to overcome the penalty of not being a heavier rider, but your horse can be the one that the vets say, this is the best looking horse. This horse, his parameters are the healthiest and the least afflicted by the 50 miles or the 100 miles that he's just done. So high vet score is very good. So there are certainly a large collection of awards that are attained at rides and through AERC. But for most of us, it really is the fact that either we lived, I got there, and we keep talking about camping. And until you've done it, it's hard to realize why this is such a big deal, because until you've had your horse tied to the side of the trailer, banging around and spinning around until it's a mud pit and refusing to eat, you don't realize how much a good, well-traveled, peaceful horse who loves food and doesn't move, how valuable they are. So what we like best is a horse who we want to be with, who looks at us and nickers when we come by, not just for the carrot, and who loves to be scratched, and who stands still when you tack it up, and who stands still when you get on, and stand still when they say on your mark, get set, go, until you say, please go. And then you never have to kick it. You only have to pull on the reins, because most of these endurance horses have a default gait of a trot, is that if you don't tell them otherwise, they trot. I mean, they just think that's their default gait. But if you say, no, I want you to walk, they're like, okay, for how long? So that's what you want, is a horse who you only have to pull on the reins. You don't have to kick it. And it eats well, it pulses well, it comes across the finish line and is just totally tickled to have done that. And then it trailers well. It doesn't give you any lip getting back on the trailer. And it jumps on the trailer and it starts rooting around in the food to come home. That's your reward for the years that you've put in, is having a friend you want to be with.
I agree. Well said, Lonnie.
Well said, Lonnie.
Beautifully said.
Absolutely.
All right, now we're going to go to slide 12 and back to Terry.
So once you've achieved the goal, we've talked about, the whole purpose of this is, when shit goes right. And we've talked about all these goals we want to set. You do have to give yourself an attaboy. You set the goal, you did all the work to get there. Go ahead and celebrate. Absolutely. Have a cocktail, have a cookie, give your horse a pat, whatever it is that you want to do, and be proud of that achievement, whatever that goal is, and you've made it. That is something to be proud of. Once you've hit that goal, though, we want to talk about regrouping. Take a look at how you did it. Take a look at what resources you used to get there. Do you have that in you again? Is that something you need to repeat? Or do you need to look at what the next steps are? So if your goal, we've had a lot of chat about the no frills and the intro ride. People being concerned about going to a ride that is technical, people going to a ride that has no crew available at a vet tech. Okay. These are all worthwhile goals. So for those of you who are now considering, and I hope that's a bunch of you, going to the no frills ride, make it your goal. Figure out how to pack for the vet tech in the smallest bucket possible. Diane will really appreciate that, because she's the one that's in charge of loading that truck that goes out to the vet tech. How do you get your essentials into a little tiny box that doesn't weigh a whole lot? Because you don't want to bring a steamer trunk. That's
Or the
that's
trash
the goal.
bag.
Yep, you get one trash bag and you want to keep it light. How do you figure out how to get your horse to do technical trail? How do you get your horse to behave at the starting line? And once you've got those goals set and you accomplish that event and nobody died, then you look at how did we do that? Did it go picture perfect? Did it have glitches in the system? How do we make it better? So then you immediately go and you look at the calendar and you say, okay, this one went well, let's start a new one. Or maybe we need to go back to square one because that was a shit show. We need to start over and do it again. That's okay too. Saying, you know, okay, we finished, but we need to reevaluate. That is an absolutely fine thing. We always sit down after an event and say, okay, what went right? What didn't go right? What do we need to look at again? How do we figure out how not to let that happen? Because every ride gives you something that you didn't expect, that you didn't plan for. And we've been doing this a long time. And the forest provides fun entertainment on occasion. Your horse comes up with new and fun ways to get into things. Your tack, your clothing, all of it does things that you never thought it would do. Yes, Lisa, there is snoring. It is my dog. I'm sorry. Lisa's asking us if there is snoring happening, and my dog is sitting between my legs on the ottoman, and yes, she's snoring. I'm sorry if that's what you can hear.
And just a few minutes ago, my little dog was having a doggy nightmare. I had to go wake her up.
Oh
My
no.
poor guy's been barking.
She was
Oh,
making all
that's awful.
Yeah.
Okay, so think about what's next. Either plan a new ride, figure out, oh my God, I'm never wearing that pair of socks again. My bra wasn't the right thing. I got to get a new one. If these are small things that you can reevaluate at the end of each experience that you have and prioritize. If your horse had issues and something else had issues, figure out what are the things that are most important for us to accomplish. Like Lanny was saying, getting another t-shirt isn't necessarily a priority. Your horse doesn't care if you get another t-shirt, but your horse does care if they can trust you and they feel good and they're enjoying their day. So if you got a t-shirt and your horse is miserable, your priorities might be upside down. So that's something to consider. And then once you've got your shit together, think about helping somebody else. Offer your tales of woe and your things that humbled you as advice and help for other people, because you all are benefiting from the information that we've all tripped over ourselves, and are sharing all of our things and humbling ourselves in front of you. And so doing that for other people is a way to bring others along in the sport. And that is one of the things about endurance that in the equestrian world that is so unique. And this is why people get hooked on it. Because any of us who've done the horse show circuit ever in our lives, we realize that it is a very cliquish, very mean girl kind of atmosphere. And endurance is the antithesis of that atmosphere. If you are stumbling, if you are struggling, if you need something, literally people will give you the shirt off their back to help you be successful. While it is competitive, as in you've got two riders in this picture who are technically in competition with one another, but they will celebrate each other's victory of crossing that finish line because it's what we do. We are all out there rooting for each other to be successful. And that is why we all keep coming back. As hard and as painful and as Um, difficult as this sport can be, is in double, triple, quadruple amounts beneficial emotionally, physically, to us in ways that we can't even talk about. You know, but we all get the feel at the end of every event. So that's why we're here.
Nicely said, Terry. Okay, so we hope we're getting you tempted to come. Maybe you don't want to come yet. So what, maybe you want to come in? Oh, why isn't it moving? Uh-oh, sorry. Ah, everyone will know that I've had some technology times today. Why is it not moving? That's weird. Sorry, guys, technology.
Well, I'll just start speaking to the next slide while you try to get
Thank
it.
you. There it is. Yay, why don't you come volunteer?
Oh, so if one of your goals is to learn more about endurance before you actually try to do an endurance ride, the best way to do that is to come volunteer, not just go on the ARC website and read their articles, but one of the best ways to learn or improve in your own care of your horse and getting through an endurance ride successfully is to actually come and volunteer. And there are many opportunities with the Old Dominion. I'm hesitating. I'm kind of thrown. You turned my long link into this thing.
It's a hyperlink.
It's a hyperlink.
You click on that and it'll go right to your thing when you need, Diane.
Okay. So for usually for no frills, everybody calls me and I write all their names down, and then I try not to lose all my little pieces of paper. Seeing the Old Dominion, I have a volunteer coordinator who has created a beautiful questionnaire, a very complicated one for the Old Dominion. She helped me make one for no frills. So if you would like to come and volunteer, you'll click on this hyperlink here that says no frills volunteer. And it's a very short questionnaire, but it's basically your way of signing up. And then closer to the ride, you'll hear from me and might ask you a few more questions and I will get you on our volunteer list and assign you a job. Again, when you volunteer, like if you're brand new to it, if you scribe for a vet, our vets are fantastic. They will answer, they love teaching and they will answer any questions you have. You can observe if you help crew. We already talked about no frills being a no crew vet check. If you volunteer and actually crew, you're up there and you can watch how different riders handle their horse, what they do when they come in, when do they give the electrolytes to their horse, do they let them eat before they go down, watching the ones that drop tack and are ready to go right down to the vet check. You can learn so much from watching others, what to do right and what to do wrong by watching others. But anyway,
Diane, we actually made that an exercise for my teenagers. I gave them a list of things that I wanted them to look for, kind of like a scavenger hunt. Yes. They had to come back to me with how many different breeds of horses they could find, how many different types of saddles people used. And this was the first year that they volunteered to crew at this ride, and they got immediately what I was wanting from them. And now they'll go up to people, perfect strangers, and say, what is that thing you're using? Or what is that saddle? I've never seen one of those. It's a really good opportunity to go shopping for stuff without ever having to buy it yourself, because you can see what people use. You ask them what their techniques are, get all up into their stuff. You can look and see what they're using. So crewing at that ride is a really good opportunity to ask people all the questions and look at all their things and see what they're using.
And then the second hyperlink there is the actual questionnaire for the national championship, which is also our June ride. So that's the one I was talking about, that the national championship will be Thursday and Saturday, and our regular open division ride will be on Friday. That hyperlink will take you to that questionnaire if you want to sign up and volunteer there.
Fabulous. Okay, thank you, Diane. And now, oh, Foodle. There it is. I found what I'm looking for. I found another. Oh, yay, it worked. I found another way to use PowerPoint. This has been a big learning curve for me tonight with the PowerPoints. I have added, I've usually add our resources. We have two pages of resources here. We have, again, hyperlinks for the ARC. We talked about the education tab. Our Old Dominion has an endurance primer. If you're new to the sport, some ways to it, the ones that we are sectioned through, Extra, Oats, Sarah, and Ride and Tie that Lonnie didn't really talk about that much this time, but it's another fun thing to do of 2 riders and 1 horse. And that's another thing that you will see popping up at rides more often. That might be something you might be interested in.
Tanya,
Yes,
right now, that website, that link right there does not work to go to the Old Dominion website. There's been a glitch. It is now odeeo.org to
okay,
get to the Old Dominion website.
okay, I can send an update to people later.
Okay.
The other page of resources we have is Green Beans, and Griffin was on with us today. She's the director of Green Beans. This is if you have a fewer than as it says in here, 1,000 career, limited distance or endurance miles, you're eligible to be a Green Bean. And this is, they have a very active Facebook group. You can be on a Green Bean team. They have different challenges you can do. Our webinars are now have their own tab as a Green Bean points. So you can earn points, and there's even something for us old Green Beaners like me, where you can still earn points from doing miles or something, which I'm gonna go try to do. I also, electrolytes are always a big question, and this is a fabulous article about it. Also, Endurance Essentials web-based course, Patty Stedman, Patty Carey Stead, she puts this on. Patty's fabulous. I took this web course myself, web-based course, and I learned a lot about basic endurance too. So I always like to refer that one. And then the last panel is questions and answers. And I'm gonna leave that to Lisa. I don't know how many questions and answers we have.
Well, we actually have been answering questions as we go along. And at this point, we don't have any questions. Oh, wait, there is one question that came through. Sorry. My horses wear shoes, not boots. Do you recommend pads, or should shoes be fine at no frills?
It is required to have 4 shoes or 4 boots, hoof protection on all 4. A lot of people do pad for no frills and the Old Dominion. If anyone else wants to speak to it, I know I do.
I think what a lot, also, it entirely depends on your horses, the construction of their feet, the size of their feet, and how well they can hold pads. Because I know a compromise is a lot of times people will put pads on the front feet, but not the hind, just because the front feet are the ones taking the brunt of the weight and the rocks, things like that. And of course, in a perfect world, you'd put pads on all 4 feet, but then there's pluses and minuses to everything. It's a little bit harder to keep the shoes on and things like that. But definitely with this ride is you will be very happy if you pad. Is some rides, and of course, if you're going to bring Foxcatcher back, is that's a very gentle ride. It's mostly woods and trees and things like that and fields. So you just don't need pads. But the Old Dominion rides and the no fill rides, and every horse is different, because some of our Arabians who have smaller feet, they don't have these big platter feet that land on the rocks with a thud and get bruises and things like that. But most of the time you will be much happier if you pad on all 4, or at least the front 2.
And I usually only pad the front 2, but as you were saying, it depends on your horse's feet. My Arab had such bad walls that if I padded, I could never keep the shoes on. So I did do her without pads, and she got through.
That's the same thing. My Arab, I don't pad, but my gated mare, I actually use pads and studs on all 4 for my gated horse. But for my Arab, I just do steels and studs and no pads. Because the one time I did pads with her, she pulled off all 4 shoes.
Yeah. It
But
can be.
really-
Going into no frills, it is first ride of the season for us. So I will pad front feet. That is one way that will force me to be particularly cautious on anything that has more rock. So it's I don't want to say a slowdown tactic, but it is going to make me think a little bit harder about what I'm doing. Because it's first ride of the season, I don't need to be running around.
Okay.
Anybody have any other questions from the participants? We have a thank you for shout out to Lonnie and to all the participants or all the panelists for bringing up the green horse for no frills at the beginning of the session tonight. And also a shout out for all the feedback that you guys have provided.
It's because Lanny's awesome.
We love doing this. You can't shut us up.
You have fun too.
And
Awesome.
we learn from each other every time we do one of these presentations.
Oh my goodness,
We
I learned so
do.
much.
We have a couple other questions or a comment from Griffin Keller. Equipack CS is a good option for a pad. I found that I can do myself right before the ride if needed versus the whole cycle. Though it
Oh,
stays put.
Yep.
And then another question. In general, how often do you ride during the week to prepare for a 50 and 100-mile ride?
That's a good one. We are beginning of the season here. I am trying to get my guy out 2 to 3 times a week. And when I say out, I'm talking like we have one day that's dedicated to walking right now because the terrain has been mucky, yucky, and or frozen. And he's not a good walker. So we are working on his walking skills. During the 100, which we have on our list of goals, the Old Dominion 100 National Championship, there is a tremendous amount of walking required. So we're working once a week on our walking skills based on work schedule and just how life is. Right now, I'm riding for about 2 hours in an afternoon in order to work on that walking. However far I get is however far I get. I don't measure the miles. I'm riding with the daylight that I have. As days get longer, that ride will get longer. Then I try to do one work where I'm moving more. And when I say moving more trotting. If I can't trot, I'm focusing on transitions. If I can get 6 miles out of that workout, I'm very happy. As the season wears on, I will do one more workout during the week where I up my miles and try to do a workout that is somewhere between 12 and, as the season gets longer, 20 miles. So just to give you kind of where I'm at between now and no frills, because that's kind of a short-term goal for us. I'm actually going to join Diane this weekend. I live in territory that has some rolling terrain, but no mountains. So Diane lives closer to mountains. We're going to go meet a mountain this weekend, and we're going to walk up the mountain. And then the second day, we'll go again and walk up the mountain. So that will be our long, hard push, 2 days back to back. And then we'll go back to our 3-day a week, lots of walking, little bit of trotting, and something a little bit longer until we get to no frills. And no frills, we're going to do the 30 miles on Friday we're gonna drag ride the first loop of the 50 on Saturday. So it'll be another back-to-back push. So no frills for us is a goal within a goal. It's a stepping stone to the national championship. So as we get closer to the 100, we'll do longer and longer distances and we will increase our pace. But I don't ever do more than 3 workouts in a week. 2 of them are short and easy, and 1 of them is longer and more stressful.
And I would like to interject, you need to be realistic in what you can do if you have a full-time job. When the Morgan we were talking about, and I was a school administrator, I got my training rides in on Saturday and Sunday, and I actually used rides to leg up my horse. I would go to the ride and it would be a training ride. I wasn't trying to place. I wanted to complete, and I was doing negative splits. I was trying to leg her up so that later in the season I could compete per se for, placing or middle of the pack. But in that time when I was a school administrator, I wasn't getting home before dark. So I did what I could do. Now that I'm retired, as Terry is saying, I'm trying to, and mine is a young horse. I had to retire my Arab because of severe arthritis. So I'm bringing along a young Mustang Arab, and at least 1 ride a week is mental. It is him listening to me. It's him. I don't want him to end out with a race brain. And he can easily get one, I'm learning. And so I'm able to get out 3 times a week. But as Terry was saying, I don't ever ride him more than 3 times a week because I want him to have those recovery days in between. One of those rides a week will be a conditioning ride. One's a very mental ride where he's connected to me and he's listening. And he is on a click, will go up to a trot, but a very light rein will come back to a walk, so that I know that he's not getting into that push into the hackmore and I'm going no matter what kind of thing, because he's only 6.
The other thing to add, in addition, and the only reason I'm riding my guy 3 days a week is because he is the most easy keeper we've ever owned. He is an Arab, but on a regular basis, people ask when he is going to deliver his foal and whether or not he's a quarter horse. So without that extra day, he is fluffier than he should be, and he gets like 3 pellets of balancer. Like it's not a food thing. He needs exercise.
Didn't he weigh in at 1,300 pounds at Fort Valley?
No, it wasn't that bad. He was 1130. That's where you're getting the
Oh,
3 from.
That was my dyslexia. I flipped the numbers.
Yeah, no,
So
he
I-
was
so I think that-
1130.
I think that one of the answers to the 50-mile ride is you don't know until you try. Is you never feel ready until you do it, and we keep talking about the negative splits, but that's why you feel like I've only ridden for 2 hours 3 times a week, or the farthest I've ridden is 13 miles, or the farthest I've ridden. Your horse is ready, but you have to listen and do as Diane says, is use it as a training ride. But you don't know until you enter. You don't know until you try it if you're ready. So you just take it easy. Don't rush. Don't try to keep up with the group. Plan your ride. Do your timing. Say I'm well on schedule to finish up 8 hours, 9 hours, 10 hours. And you'll find that even if you're only riding a maximum of 13 to 15 to 20 miles, you'll find you are ready for a 50-mile ride if you listen to your horse and don't overdo it.
And look at
True
each
story.
loop. And look at each loop as a training ride. If you've been doing 13-mile training rides or 15, then when you come in on that first loop, then you just finished your training ride. Horse rest, horse eats. Now you're going to go out and try and do another training ride for another loop. Think of it that way instead of thinking, oh my God, I'm doing 50 miles.
Exactly. Only look at it loop to loop to loop. Don't ever look at it as the whole big chunk, or you will run screaming.
We have a question: would just dressage work help my horse to carry herself more efficiently for endurance?
Yes, dressage is a wonderful tool. I have one horse in the whole barn who likes it and will participate willingly, and the rest of them, after the second time around the ring, start giving us the hoof. They think that's the dumbest thing they've ever done. If your horse will do it willingly, by all means, it's fantastic exercise. But I like to describe the way I work as I do my ring work in the woods. So I find a little technical trail in the woods and I ask for leg yielding, or I ask for bending, or I ask for a shoulder in, or whatever it is. I'm doing that on trail because mine, they all have ADD and going around in circles, they don't like it.
And I think of dressage or even lesson work as cross training, just like humans cross train for doing marathons.
5 minutes, 10 minutes.
Yeah, it's extremely beneficial. And if you have the time and the patience and your horse has the patience, absolutely. Anything you do with your horse creates fitness and bonding and brain cells. So I never poo-poo any other work that you can do. It all leads to a good, healthy relationship.
I think it was interesting is that in this month's endurance news, which just came out, Nick Kohut, who's the president of the AERC, wrote a terrific article, and it involved cross training. And it was a great article on how beneficial it is for your horse's training and your horse's mindset. But I was thinking, I wonder what other sports think that cross training is so great. Think of any other sport where they say, oh, take your thoroughbred out and do this, or take your racehorse. I mean, I thought it was pretty cool that he was really pointing out, if you get a chance to read it, how beneficial all these different things are for your endurance horse. It really helps because going down the trail at a trot and a canter, you use a certain amount of muscles, but you're not really focusing on the core and the back and stretching the top line. And so it's absolutely true that dressage is excellent, but so is any other. I mean, it's very, very good. As Terry says, a lot of Arabians won't tolerate it because they said, I have been around this ring once, I'm done. But you can try to figure out how to make it fun, and it's really good for them. Cross training is excellent.
Very cool.
So
We've
you want to
actually
let us
been
know?
using, for a number of years, we've been using our Arabs with a group that some of our riders have disabilities. And that has been the biggest eye-opening experience for them, because they hang out with their endurance friends. And then when they show up for a trail ride with the special needs group, you can see them look around and they go, oh, this is what we're doing today. And their whole demeanor just mellows out and their behavior is completely different. So that's been a really good skill for them to have.
Very, very awesome.
So Sonia, you want to tell us when our next webinar is, so people can look forward to it?
Diane has exact date, I believe. Diane?
Yes, it's March 15th, and it will be a panel of successful endurance riders that have completed the Old Dominion 100 multiple times and have gone out and done Tevis or other 100-mile rides out west. As the panel will consist of Stag Newman, who has completed the old D100 10 times out of, I think he said 17, I'm not sure. Am O'Bain, who holds the actual course record for the course that'll be running for the national championship. Claire Godwin, who has completed the OD 100 9 or 10 times. I've been looking up her record. Who has also done Tevis. She's also done, I believe, the OD Vermont and Tevis all in 1 year on one horse. So a lot of expertise there. Sarah Schick, Kelly Stoneburner, and Brenna Stevens. Kelly and Brenna both, I know, did their very first 100 at the OD. They both have completed the Tevis several times. The focus of the panel discussion is going to be about conditioning. They're going to be doing basically a compare and contrast of the Old Dominion and Tevis. But the real focus is going to be how to prepare to be successful to do the OD 100. And that will be at 7 o'clock on Tuesday, March 15th.
Very awesome. Look forward to that one a lot. Okay. I believe we are finished with our webinar. Thank you,
all.
everyone. Thank you all for joining us. We appreciate it. All right,
Thank you, thank you.
let's stop sharing.
Thank you,
All right,
everybody.
there we go.